Okay, uh, welcome back to our discussion on middleware. So I want to introduce another type of middleware, and this time this middleware is to recover from panics. Okay, so it turns out that whenever a connection comes into the server, Go will create a new Go routine. Okay, you can think of it as a process, and that process will handle that connection. That way, we could have as a lot of connections coming into the server, and those connections are handled concurrently, meaning the server will be able to speed up. Okay, there won't be any blocking. So connections comes in, uh, Go routines are created, and Go routines are used to handle each of those connections. Now, what happens if in one of those Go routines um, there is some error? Okay, so let's say the user uh, wrote a URL, wrote a path for some handler, and there was some catastrophic error in that handler, and so under normal circumstances, um, it would have probably crashed the server, okay, or crashed the web server, or crashed some part of the application, or bring down the entire application. So to prevent that, what Go does is to simply close the connection for that particular Go routine, and then it terminates that Go routine. Now, that is great because the server um, will not stop. The server will not fail. But the problem is the user does not know what has happened. And so the user does not get an appropriate message telling them that something went wrong. So to show you that, I will simply introduce a panic. I'm going to deliberately panic inside my home handler. And I'll just use the panic function. And you give it a string. Let's say this is not good. Okay. Oops. All right. Let's save that. Let's open a terminal. Let's start our server. Then I'm going to create a new terminal, and I will simply use curl with the -i option, http :/localhost 4000. Okay, notice it's an empty reply from server, so there is no response. All right, there is no response. Um, and so if I do localhost, right, this is what the user would see. Doesn't make any sense. So what I want to do, I want to create some middleware so that we can give the user an appropriate message. And also we want to be able to do sort of the house cleaning ourselves, meaning we want to close the connection, um, then send back the error message to the user. All right, so let's see how that looks like. Okay, I also noticed that the message that is logged basically is telling you that something went wrong. Okay, so this is not good. Oops. And then it tells you the go routine, in this case 18. Then it gives you the stack trace. Okay, and of course the good thing is the server keeps running, which is what we want. All right, so let's stop the server, and let's create a middleware that makes things a bit more clear for the user. Okay, so we're gonna send back the server error, if you recall, right? Server error to the user. So let's just create our middleware. Of course, the pattern will remain the same. So I will just copy and paste. And I will call my middleware recover panic middleware. So I don't need any of that. I won't do any post processing. Okay. So before I call next.serve HTTP, I want to create a differ function. And so to create a differ function, I will simply say differ. Okay, and then I will use the func. Okay, so this is an anonymous function. And so this function will only be called. So whenever Go sees a differ function, it will only call it if it encounters a panic. Okay, so if there is no panic, then we will simply execute line 36. There was no panic. However, if there is a panic, something happens to the handler and the Go routine is about to be killed off by Go, then what Go will do is to come back here, all right, and then it will notice, okay, there's a panic. So there's a defer, which means that it will handle that panic for me. It will recover from that panic. And so what I want to do is to check to see if there is actually a panic happening. And so I'm going to call the recover function, okay, and of course it returns an error, okay, and then after I have called it, I will check that error message, and if it's not nil, then I am assured that there was a panic. And so if there's a panic, I want to do two things. I want to close the connection. Previously, Go did that for me, but now I'm going to do it. And to close the connection, we simply use the connection keyword, and the value of connection will be close. Okay, so that will close the connection. The next thing I want to do is to call the server error function. So if you recall, it's app.server error. Okay, and so I'm going to pass it W, and I'm going to pass it the error message. So let's just convert the error message. Okay, error F. And that error message, we're going to use a formatted string, and that will be replaced by error. Okay. Now, notice Go was smart enough, and it added this portion for me, right? Because remember, server error is a method on our application type. And so if I want to use that server error method, I have to precede it with app, which means I have to also make my middleware a method on application. All right? Again, it's still middleware because it takes a handler and it returns a handler. Okay, so that's the if. That's there. And then I will need to close. Okay, so let me close my function here and then close that there. Okay, oops, went ahead of myself. Okay. Oh yeah, good. So I need to put my open and close paren. Okay. This means that it will execute, but only if there's a panic. Okay, so I have that, and then I have my call to next.serve HTTP, and so now I can close here, and then I can close the function. Good. So we are finished. All right. So again, you must include this portion here. Okay. In other words, that's saying execute the function. Execute the function. Again, this is only executed if there is a panic. Okay. So we have our middleware completed. And so now we need to see where we're going to put it. So let's open our routes. And so the question becomes, where should I put it? Well, if you think about it, it makes sense to put it outside. So I'm going to say app dot, okay, recover money. And so you might be asking, why do we put it there? Well, if you think about it, if it's the first one being called, then that's a good thing. Because if it's the first one being called, okay, then it has that defer function right there waiting. And so it goes ahead and it calls log requests. Okay, let's say there are no errors, no panics. And then log requests will call security header. Okay, let's say there are no panics. And then security header will call the mocks. All right, and so mocks will call the handler. And so let's say mocks calls home, and there's a panic. And so that handler will panic, which means that Go will send control back to security header. And then security header, of course, will send control back to log request, and then log request will send control back to recover panic. And so recover panic has that defer function, which, because it's a defer function, it will be executed by Go to handle the panic that happened within this chain. Okay, so let's give this a try to see if it makes a difference. So I'm going to call my web server. I'm going to open a new terminal, and I'm going to call it again. And so notice I get this internal server error message. Okay, and if I go back to my Go terminal, all right, my server doesn't crash as usual. All right, it doesn't do anything new. We still get our panic, okay? But the user gets back this internal server error. Okay, internal server error. The user can understand now that something went wrong on the server. All right, so this is just another instance of where we can use middleware. Again, I haven't said this, I haven't really said this before. Middleware, you can think of it as being an easier way to manage your code. So for example, let's say you wanted to log every request. Okay, you could go to the handler. Right, you could go to the handler. Let me remove this. You could go to the handler and you could write all the middleware code right here, right? Which is, okay, so when you reach the handler, you're going to create a timer. You're going to call the logger, and then you're going to check for this and do that, okay? But the problem becomes, if you're going to log every request, then you have to write that same code in every handler, okay? And so that won't really make any sense. So by using your middleware, you write the middleware once, and then you simply use it to cover all the requests, which is much neater, much cleaner, and more easily extendable than having to write all that code inside every individual handler. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. Again, this is just another use of a handler where we are able to recover from a panic, um, whereby we don't want we don't want to use Go's default behavior in a panic, which is to just close the connection, and the user has no idea what happened. All right. So in the next lesson, I want to introduce to you an external package, a third-party package, which some people use with middleware. Okay, and all it does is to make your calling the middleware somewhat easier. Okay, so I'll show you that in the next lesson. I'll see you then.